excited to introduce Kelly Yurick next for a topic that, again, is sort of that leading edge type of content that we want you two to be able to bring to all of you. And we had a little bit of a generational talk earlier. I got called a millennial, which I am. But Gen Z is really this puzzle that a lot of marketers are trying to figure out. Bill Barona talked earlier about TikTok, and it's not just dancing. Well, you know what? TikTok isn't just for Gen Z, and Gen Z isn't only on TikTok. There's a lot more about reaching, finding, and communicating with Gen Z. I don't know a lot about it, but Kelly Yurick from Marcus Thomas does. So, Kelly, I'm going to hand this over to you, and please take us through it.
Thank you for that introduction. Again, my name is Kelly Yurick. I'm an assistant research specialist at Marcus Thomas, an advertising agency here in Cleveland. And I've been focusing a lot of my work on generational differences and have been able to take the time to focus a little bit more on Generation Z. So a lot of brands and companies, know the importance of the difference between marketing, the differences between each generation, and a lot of that focus has been on millennials so far. So let's take some time today to talk about Generation Z, who they are, why they matter, and why they matter specifically to social and digital marketers. So looking solely at the numbers, it's obvious that Generation Z is one that demands attention. With over 90 million people, they make up the largest generational cohort. But aside from the numbers, Generation Z also has many other qualities that marketers will need to learn to pay attention to and why they should. So Generation Z is on track to be the largest, most ethnically diverse, and best educated and most financially powerful generation ever. So aside from those numbers, there are many other things that we're gonna wanna learn and pay attention to dealing with this generation. So starting out here, let's take a little bit of time to better understand the background, who are Gen Z, and what is their worldview. So Pew Research Center defines Generation Z as those born between 1997 and 2012, making them between the ages of 7 and 22 in 2019. So the oldest this year will be turning 23, that includes me. Our predecessors are Millennials, followed by Gen X, Boomers, and Silents. So again, it's important just to remember these generations as we move through to kind of be able to think about them in comparison to Generation Z. So the world that Generation Z is growing up in is obviously a crazy one, especially right now. We're living in unprecedented times. So there are over 35 million songs in the Spotify library. They have access to seemingly unlimited information and entertainment. Two-day delivery has become commonplace for this group, and they're driving serious expectations about convenience as they become spenders. There are more than 1 million subreddits online, each talking about niche topics, which really gives a nod to those global online communities that we're seeing. In 2018, there were 24 school shootings resulting in deaths. This is becoming commonplace in the 21st century. Crowdsourced reviews are revolutionizing purchase consideration, and Yelp alone has over 184 million reviews. And as a new consumer ethos is spreading, one that values self-care and wellness, the wellness industry is currently valued at over $4 trillion. So all of this kind of adds up to the world that Gen Z has known, the world that they're currently and still growing up in. And one of the major takeaways from all of this is that Generation Z is the first generation of true digital natives. They have never known life without the internet. So what matters to this group? What are some of their defining traits and some of the issues that they're facing today? So these are three key characteristics that define Generation Z. They're motivated. Having a successful career and making money are two very important values to this generation. So you can think about all the people that are taking their side hustles or their hobbies and turning them into side hustles. This group is huge on that. They're also socially conscious. So they're a predominantly liberal group thinking about civil rights and social justice and how that impacts their view on politics, how they interact with brands, and how they actually approach their personal life decisions. And beyond that, they're also individualistic. So while they're similar to older generations in many senses, there's a clear trend in that Generation Z is much more focused on individualism and wanting to stand out and be their authentic selves. So some of the key issues that Generation Z is facing within their lifetime include racial equality, LGBTQ issues, gun control, and climate change. So these are issues that we hear talked about all the time on the media and especially through social media, and they're directly affecting this group. So we'll dive into each of these just a bit more. The first being racial equality. So Generation Z is less likely to say that they believe that Black Americans are treated equally as white Americans. And this is opposite for older generations. So the older the generation, the opposite becomes true. And this is similar to what we're seeing with LGBTQ issues as well. Younger generations are more likely to know someone who uses gender-neutral pronouns compared to their older counterparts. Gun control has been a huge topic, especially for this young group in recent years. We all know, unfortunately, the many school shootings that have taken place across America, and one of those happened to be at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School, where Emma Gonzalez here was in her senior year. So she helped organize the March for Our Lives campaign, which attracted over 2 million protesters to Washington, D.C. alone, and she was only 18 at the time. So following this trend of teen activists, we all know Greta. So she has been heading this climate crisis and confronting international leaders across the globe. And she just turned 17 on January 3rd of this year. So again, it's safe to say that the young people are willing to make their voice heard and demanding change and attention. So moving away from who they are and what issues they're facing currently, we'll talk a bit about their financial senses. So what are their goals and what is this entrepreneurial spirit that we keep hearing about this young group? So while many brands and companies are quick to write off Gen Z as being too young or too broke to pay attention to, it's important to note that Gen Z already commands as much as $143 billion in US spending power. Aside from that, even more surprisingly, 16% claim to be saving for retirement already. So whereas we saw millennials as more of those experiential spenders, Gen Z is more about saving. They're more pragmatic. But that doesn't mean they don't get stressed thinking about their future, as everyone does. And their financial situation is going to fall to the top of the list. So what are some brands and companies doing to alleviate these stressors for this young group? Current is one of those companies making a difference here. So this is an online banking system for parents and teens. And you can kind of think of it like a Venmo, where parents can schedule allowance payments for their kids, track weekly spending, and help instill some financial values into young consumers. And they also do a great job with their dual marketing. So when you go to Current's online page, there's a banking tab and there's a drop down for one for parents and one for teens. And the parent drop down uses words like you can see here, convenience and responsibility, things that would be appealing to this older group. Whereas the teens banking page uses the word freedom. So again, this is a great dual marketing approach, a great example of that, where it's reaching multiple generations. Another company that's doing this on a different scale is Depop. So Depop is a social shopping app, which is kind of like Instagram, a mixture of Instagram and eBay. And that's where young consumers can go and they can buy vintage clothing, buy and sell. And this is a great example for a platform that's really attracting the younger user. 90% of their users are under the age of 26. Also speaking on this entrepreneurial spirit for this group, they're motivated, they want to make money, and they're looking for things like mentorship and backing, finance backing for these micro entrepreneurs. So that's something to keep in mind as a brand and a company, and what you can do for these young people who are looking to make a difference. So these two examples that are on the screen currently are two young entrepreneurs, one being Connor Blakely, who is the founder of Youth Logic, which is a marketing consultancy, and they consult on different generations. So their focus is helping brands reach, engage, and understand Generation Z. And he first founded his social media agency at age 14. Noah on the right here is the founder of Nannies by Noah, and she was from New York City. She noticed this need. She wanted to find a way to find engaging and fun sitters, the ones that she would want to have in her home. And at age 12, she developed this company. And after going to school and graduating, she's still heading up this business. So it's safe to say that young people are interested in creating their own businesses, creating their own path from a young age. So again, with Depop, these slides were a bit out of order. So with media and social media, we'll talk a little bit about the shifts that we're seeing, the fame, the influencers, and activism that we're seeing on social media platforms as well. So Generation Z was born into a world of social media, constant connectivity, and on-demand entertainment and communication. Growing up in this always-on tech environment has obviously created shifts in youth behaviors, attitudes, and lifestyles. So whereas millennials had the chance to sort of adapt to technology as they came of age, Gen Z have been born into this world. This is all they've ever known, and we're still learning about the effects that this is having on this young group. So one of those things being smartphones. So by age 11, a majority of kids have their own smartphone, and by 12, more than 2/3 do. So as you can see on this chart here, it demonstrates smartphone ownership by age in the year 2015 versus the year 2019. So all along the bottom, this is between ages 8 to 18, and you can see a lift among every single age group for these past 4 years. The largest being at age 12, when in 2015, only 41% of those who are 12 years old own a smartphone, jumping all the way up to 69% in 2019. Another shift we're seeing has been in video content. So online video viewing is through the roof. We all know that video content has been reigning king, and there's been a large drop in the amount of time that both tweens and teens actually spend watching TV on a TV set. So again, this chart here shows 2015 versus 2019. And you can see that in 2015, 48% were watching live TV on a TV set. That saw the biggest drop into 2019, all the way down to 24%, while the other two categories grew. So on other devices grew up to 36%, and time shifted on a TV set grew up to 40%. So think watching on demand, watching recorded and played back, things like that. News reception has also seen a major shift. So 49% of Gen Z adults say that they get their news from social media, whereas only 17% of all older adults say so. And these numbers basically are flip-flopped when you look at who's consuming news through television, where 15% of Gen Z adults are doing so compared to 42% of all older adults. So this has been a huge shift in the way that we consume news. Beyond that, interaction through social media has changed in the time that social media has been around. Younger consumers are much more willing to use their real identities than older consumers. And this might be because they're more comfortable sharing their opinion online, they're less afraid of harm or backlash. And this has to do with Gen Z wanting to stay authentic and be their true selves. They want to share their opinions and not think about the ramifications. Younger women aged 18 to 34 are less likely to want strangers to follow their social media. So while they're still comfortable with sharing their opinions online, they're just a bit more conservative about who actually gets to see them. So most interestingly, there's been a disconnect among age groups when it comes to meeting new people. Younger people are much more likely to say that they believe that social media is a great tool for meeting new people, whereas older consumers are less likely to say so. So this points to the fact that meeting new people has different criteria among different age groups. So this is a little bit of a different way to look at the different social media platforms that are being used by age group. So if you look here, each logo represents the share of that age group who say that they use the platform. And this is spanning from ages 13 up to 38. So as you can see, YouTube, again, video content is king, is pulling ahead for all age groups. Facebook is better off for those older age groups, 22 to 38. And then Instagram, Snapchat falls somewhere in between. Twitter's on the lower end. But most interestingly, like the title says, 13 to 16-year-olds are as likely to use TikTok as Facebook and Twitter, which is surprising knowing that Facebook and Twitter have been around, they're established, they have a huge user base. But TikTok is really pulling ahead for that 13 to 21-year-old age group. It's also interesting here if you know Twitch, which is the little quotation mark symbol there in purple. While it's still on the lower end for these age groups, it's important to note that it's higher for that 13 to 16 range than any other age group. So Twitch is a live streaming platform where a lot of gaming is live streamed. And this will be something that we want to keep an eye on in the coming months, coming years. This gaming environment has really changed. Gen Z teens are more likely to count console video games as a favorite activity, even more so than watching their favorite TV shows and movies. About 51% of teens agree that they'd rather play video games than watch TV. And this has created a whole new environment. So there are gamers that are playing at home or online. They're playing with friends that they know, or maybe online friends that they only know through gaming. There's also influencers who are live streaming their content on platforms like Twitch. There are creators who are learning how to build these games and create them. And then there's also fans who are buying merchandise for their favorite players, following along, and even attending these esports tournaments held in stadiums. So it's safe to say that Generation Z loves interactive content. So one example of a company taking control of this is Gillette. So Gillette formed the Gillette Gaming Alliance, where they had 11 different Twitch influencers from 11 different countries. And they started this Bits for Blades initiative. So while fans were watching their favorite influencers, their favorite gamers live stream on platforms, they were able to click things like banner ads and be able to buy Gillette products through Amazon in order to earn Twitch bits. So this was kind of like an online form of currency that they could then donate to support their favorite Gaming Alliance member. This resulted in a 4% increase in organic sales for grooming. So this was definitely a successful campaign. So moving forward, interestingly here, a quarter of Gen Z adults aspire to be famous. So while this might just be the optimism of youth, there also has to be some truth to this growing influencer culture that we're seeing. So Morning Consult put out a report where Gen Z was able to identify their top influencers. So in this chart here, you can see the names listed by mentions. So those at the top had more mentions and those at the bottom less. And it's really interesting to look here and see how many of these names you actually recognize, how many you don't, and what a crazy intermixing there is among what each of these people do. So we have Jeffree Star, who is a beauty vlogger, up there with Kim Kardashian, LeBron James, and Post Malone. So you can kind of see how all these people are grouping together in the minds of Gen Z. So listening to them in their own words, what are some of the reasons they follow these people? Why are they interested? One being that they're looking for inspiration and aspiration, and seeing the successful lives of these people inspires them to do better in their own. Another reason is just plain voyeurism. Honestly, I'm a very nosy person and I like to see what other people are up to. And they also want to learn about new trends. So they like seeing new beauty trends, what works and what doesn't work. That's especially true on YouTube, Instagram, those visual platforms where we're seeing beauty vloggers really take a lot of control there. And they're also just looking for interesting and fun content. They produce stuff that's entertaining, and they're, putting out their content and information in an entertaining way. So social media is great for things beyond fame, influencers, and things of that nature. It's also really interesting to see how hashtag activism has taken hold on social media platforms. So two of the biggest movements that we know of are Black Lives Matter and the Me Too movement. And Generation Z has said that these two movements have both had an impact on their civic perspective. So on platforms like Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, anywhere that these hashtag movements can keep going, they will. And it's important to notice the longevity of these movements. So while many of these started, mid 2010s, we'll say, they're still being talked about today into 2020. So let's take a look here at brands, goodwill for brands, and how Gen Z likes to interact with this group. So Gen Zers are concerned about a wide range of issues, and they're frustrated with their governments. In fact, 61% believe that brands are better positioned than governments to solve problems. So that definitely puts a lot of pressure on brands. So how do they know when it's right to speak out? Generation Z say that they should only speak out when they have a relevant and credible point of view. Their cause should align with their mission and brand values, because Gen Z say they'll be able to tell if they're not being genuine or they're being inauthentic, which are really important traits to Generation Z. And they're more likely to boycott a brand due to political reasons, with 39% saying that they've done so within the past year. So this is a really passionate group. They're also learning about brands still through word of mouth, talking with their friends. Product reviews is ranked second here, and it's important to note that product reviews are especially important for Gen Z women. It's also interesting to see how social media influencers falls higher on this list in comparison to celebrities. And one reason for this could be that Gen Z views influencers as more relatable and more human compared to big name celebrities. Beyond this, they're very socially based in the way that they're gathering info and interacting with these companies and brands. They're doing so on platforms like Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And they're still looking for experiences. So they want something unique that's going to generate word of mouth. They want to be able to post on their own platforms, have discussion, and build their reputation. So American Eagle did a great job with their A&E by Me campaign, where they found real Gen Z participants on social media by monitoring this hashtag for the campaign. So Gen Zs could style, photograph, and record themselves in an authentic way. So instead of being at an exotic location, they could be in their backyard. Or instead of using a professional camera, they could just use their iPhone. And with Gen Z saying that it's really important to be able to express themselves and be authentic to their true selves, American Eagle noted this and said that rather than telling teens how they should look, what they should wear, they would instead provide a platform that celebrates individuality. So what does the future actually hold for Generation Z? So we know that we're in unprecedented times. We've never been here before. So a lot of this trend spotting has been done with speculation, and we know that Gen Z has felt invincible with all the news saying, that this virus affects older people more so, but we're seeing a shift in attitudes and behaviors as more information comes out. And the World Health Organization actually took to TikTok, which has a younger user group, as you all know from the presentation earlier, and talked about ways that they could help this group better understand and avoid the misinformation that's being spread out there. This group is also learning how to remote work, remote school, remote social hangout time. So there's a lot of change going on, and this might affect our new normal even post-pandemic. Beyond that, Stylus, which is a trend spotting tool, put out this report called The Consumer of 2035, where in 2035, Generation Z will be between the ages of 26 and 40 years old. So they'll still be the largest generational group in the US, and they're less bound to a traditional life path. So they have carefully chosen relationships, choosing longer term singlehood, open relationships, or even living with roommates longer. And marriage and children will again be that deeply considered choice that we saw with millennials as well. Financially, Gen Zs will get a luckier break than millennials, as boomer properties will begin to flood the market. And they'll take a more DIY and minimalist approach to their lifestyle. In their careers, the problem solvers and digital wizards will advance into automated workplaces, and others will prefer self-reliance through their entrepreneurial activities. And they're also going to enter politics at an early age, which is not surprising as we're seeing activists already speaking out, inciting local, national, and global change. So again, now is the time for social and digital marketers to prepare for the largest, most ethnically diverse, best educated, and most financially powerful generation ever. Thank you.
Love it, Kelly. I feel like I need to represent millennials in my
No, I wasn't millennial bashing.
we're important too. You guys are great. We started a little, so we were going to run a couple minutes over time because we got a couple questions for you. One, you just talked about how COVID-19 has sort of impacted. One of the questions we have is specific about sort of the star quality of influencers, or the tone and the messaging that many influencers have, and how people might see through that. Have you seen anything about how influencers may have changed their approach due to the crisis?
Yeah. I know with Generation Z being so focused on authenticity, a lot of that has come into play with how influencers are trying to engage with this younger group. So even in times of crisis like we're in right now, I think it's really important for influencers to make sure that their followers know that they're not above any of this, and they need to be helpful in trying to spread the information that people need to know. So I think Generation Z is going to find that beneficial from those people that they follow and relate to. And they want to hear, from their influencers that they're real people too. They're also going through things. And what can they do during this time that we're all trying to figure out?
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. One last question, and this does relate to the millennial piece of this, because I remember 15 years ago when I started trying to beat a similar drum to say it's really important to pay attention to millennials. And really only 15 years later, in the last year or so, have market brands said, well, now they're middle-aged, in their mid-30s, they have purchasing power, we're going to care about millennials now. How have you gotten your clients to care about Gen Z earlier? Because when I see 13 to 16-year-olds, I think, oh, I have purchasing power. Is that what matters, or are there little things that brands can start to do now to make sure they're set up for 5, 10, 15 years from now?
Yeah, sure. So this is a great question. Generation Z is really a loyal generation. So I think one of the main things that companies and brands can really hold on to when looking at this group, again, like I said, I know a lot of people think too young, too broke, and they're going to wait until they have more of that middle-aged purchasing power. But you have to think that this is a group that's going to be loyal, and they're really interested in company values. So if they resonate with your company, they're going to be more likely to stick with you for the long run.
Awesome. Thank you. I think that's huge, knowing that we pay attention to them a little bit more now. Thank you, Kelly.
Absolutely.
Again, audience, please show love on Twitter, and thank Marcus Thomas also.
Thank you so much.
Did a fantastic job, and